Hi, everybody. So, welcome to the show. I have a very special guest on the show that I'm really excited to present here, and her name is Sakshi. She is a graduate student in spirituality of mind and body at Columbia, and she's a counseling psychologist in India. And she's going to share with us the benefits of yoga.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Leon. Absolutely, I would be most happy to share about the benefits of yoga for health in general and for mental, physical, and spiritual health. I think the entire world already knows now, in a way, that there's a lot of research and there's a lot of evidence-based practices that are happening within the field of yoga for mental health and physical health, especially the breath work and the way the postures are sequenced. A lot of people use yogic postures and the breath work as well. So the pranayam, and a major part of yoga is meditation or dhyan. That is something that's pretty popular now, and people are using to maintain their health. People are also trying to use it in a very preventative sense as well. In recovery, people with chronic illnesses, whether it's maybe like a stage of cancer, or maybe, let's say, if it's a lifestyle disease, for example, hypertension, thyroid problems, or diabetes, yoga can be incorporated in the recovery phase of these kinds of illnesses.
Why do you decide that yoga is something that is vital? How come medicine in itself is not enough?
So I feel that in the modern medicine system, the way it is, there is a major focus on pharmacotherapy, using medicines for treatment. And it would majorly focus on symptomatic treatment. But when you see the Eastern forms of medicine, in which yoga also comes, so yoga or Ayurveda, and even traditional Chinese medicine, these systems of medicine would focus on the root cause of the illness, would try and go below what's causing, whether it's your lifestyle or whether it's your environment, whether it's your mind, what you're thinking as well. So that's the distinction that generally happens between modern medicine and whether if you see yoga or any Eastern form of medicine.
So what I hear you saying is that you find that Eastern approach to medicine is more holistic. It looks at the whole person's whole entire lifestyle. And then with Western medicine, it's kind of treating things a bit more on the surface, somatically.
Yeah. Yeah, in that way, you kind of like summed it up very well. And I would just like to say one thing, a concept which is very prevalent in yoga, which would really exactly tell what you're also saying. There is this concept of Panch Maya Kosh. So Panch is 5, and Kosh are generally sheets of the body. So Panch is 5 sheets, and those 5 sheets are Annamaya Kosh. Annamaya Kosh is the physical sheath. Then Pranamaya Kosha. Pran is the energy sheath of the body. And then Manomaya Kosh is the mental sheath of the body. And then there is the 4th one, that's Vignamaya Kosh, is the intellectual sheath of the body. And the last is the Anandamaya Kosh, that's the blissful state, the blissful sheath of the body. So this concept in yoga really tries to say is that how the physical body, the energy body, the mental body, the mental sheath, the intellect, and that sheath where, sometimes individuals will have out of body experiences, like they would feel that, okay, I am connected to the higher power or something beyond myself. So these sheaths are interconnected with each other. And this concept is really prevalent in the yogic philosophy, in the way Ayurveda also treats the body in the Eastern system of medicine. So the whole concept of this is that whatever, let's say, you eat will not only affect the body, it will affect the mind as well. So it's really beautifully connected.
It's really interesting to see like there's different levels like that and how they all come together to support one another.
Yeah, it's actually really beautiful. And there's always this word yoga or yoga means yuj. It comes from a Sanskrit word naming yuj. So yuj means union, and the union of the mind, the body, and the spirit. So there's like a very beautiful union. It's not about whether you're doing postures and that's the only time you're doing yoga. It's more about whatever you're doing in your life, whether it's washing utensils, whether it's just waking up, going out, and looking at maybe doing chores as well, but doing it with a presence, an entire awareness of your surroundings, of what you're feeling, how you're doing it, and just being extremely mindful. So there's a union of the mind and the body and spirit, and that becomes very yogic practice. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
So I remember that you told me that you're working on a project, and what you're planning to do is to teach yoga philosophy. You're interested in incorporating it into medicine. So can you tell us more about that?
I have had experiences with designing yogic interventions for cancer survivors in India as a thesis in my master's. I went through literature review for yogic interventions for cancer survivors, and I found that although there are really great interventions focusing on restorative postures, breath work, and meditation, and gratitude-based practices, and even diet, I felt like there was no intervention that was based on the philosophical aspect of yoga. And that is something that I thought that is like a core of yogic practice. So in one of my interventions, I designed an Ashtanga yoga intervention, which talks about all the 8 limbs of yoga. And not only the postures or the breathwork or the meditation, but also the philosophy behind yoga. So trying to understand the first 2 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, which is the yama and the niyama. So the yama and niyama has these basic philosophies like honesty, satya, and things like non-violence. So non-violence in the context of not only being non-violent towards your surroundings or towards other individuals or creatures, but also to yourself, the way you talk to your own self. Then things like minimalism or aparigraha, these concepts. So minimalism in today's context is generally looked at more about not hoard many objects, or just buy what you need, sort of a thing, and like being mindful of what you're investing in. So minimalism concept is also about what kind of people you're investing in as well. What is your social group, and how are you putting in your energy in various dimensions of your life, and other concepts of yamas and niyamas as well. So I felt that becomes like a basis for any asana practice, any posture practice, or any breath work. There is a sense of meaning that gets attached to that practice. And for the Indian cancer survivors that I had designed, it really connected with them on a deeper level because of the cultural context. And they had amazing feedback about it after the intervention. I did a pre-test and post-test intervention where we measured levels of depression, stress, anxiety, gratitude, and quality of life. There were like marked differences in scores. And there was also an amazing feedback oriented that we didn't know the philosophy behind what we're doing, the why behind how we are moving down or up, or why we are breathing this way, the alternate nostril breathing. What's the whole mechanism? So I feel like that intervention not only made the participants aware of their body, but also sort of gave them a meaning behind doing it.
Right.
So it becomes extremely holistic in that way as well.
It helps people to be able to make sense of how everything comes together in order to support their health. So I imagine when people go through this program that they're kind of internalizing a way of going about their life that is healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the Western context of yoga, it's been majorly portrayed the physical aspect of yoga and the mental aspect, the other philosophical aspect is generally not there, whether you see in yoga studios or whether you see just people wanting to do yoga. So there would be a program that says that, come practice yoga. And a lot of people won't go because they would be like, oh, I am not flexible, or I have a body issue, so I can't go. But then that happens because that's the whole concept of yoga in the minds of people. And I feel now there is a rise of understanding the philosophy as well behind yoga. And that's the true aspect of what yoga tries to tell, or yoga tries to help people with the lifestyle as a holistic, like as a wholesome practice, not as just the body or just, the breath.
Right.
It's the whole thing.
And I agree with what you say there. I think like the West does approach yoga in terms of mainly focus on the physical exercise part of it. And then they may talk about how physical exercise helps calm the mind, but they don't really integrate as much or enough of that holistic approach that this is a whole entire lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, there are great benefits of the physical aspect of yoga. There's the whole nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, they become balanced. And there's such great research now that talks about the vital capacity of lung that gets increased when you're doing breath work.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
then even things like how it affects your DNA. So there was this amazing research that I saw that talks about the telomere, the chromosome of the DNA that gets impacted when you're practicing meditation or when you're practicing yoga regularly.
Wow.
So this has an anti-aging effect on your body. But that's there, like that's pretty evident. But also at the same time, having that into consideration and also understanding that the whole aspect of why are we doing this? What's the intention behind a yoga practice in the first place? Because a lot of times people would be like, oh, yoga helps me calm down, or yoga helps me become stable. It does. That's kind of true because we see the physiological effects in the researches that are there even right now. But also something that gets sidetracked is that to become stable, the body and the mind has to go through an instability kind of a process. And sometimes you may not feel calm. But then the yogic philosophy has sort of a solution or like has a guidance for that as well. So it says that every pleasant and unpleasant. So its rag is attachment and dvesh is the aversion aspect of life. So both the emotions, both these components have to be treated equally. So it's like you become an observer of the pleasant and the unpleasant because that's a part of becoming stable. So sometimes maybe if the philosophical aspect of it comes into the whole context of learning yoga, then the individual would be like, yeah, I mean, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or if I am feeling very negative or very unpleasant, that's a part of the process.
Right.
And that's something I have to accept and maybe manage and introspect on.
So hearing you share that is, I think it's really fascinating because it's a way of embracing all aspects of life, consider negative and also what is positive, and actually they're all part of one whole.
I always used to think to myself that why can the patients not change their diet? Or why can they not become aware of the root cause of their problems or the environmental factors that are affecting them?
Right.
And then during the curriculum, the way the professors in my education taught me and said that this is something that the modern medical system doesn't focus on. The whole aspect of being a doctor is to understand how the medicine works and what medicine to give for liver cirrhosis or for hypertension or for diabetes or for thyroid issues or for in oncology departments or even for surgery. And that's the major approach of a prescription. The dietary restrictions, the environmental, the exercise restrictions, those things become very secondary to the prescription. They might be there, but then they're very secondary to the prescription. And I used to feel personally that for me, it doesn't matter if I'm going to be a doctor or not, but just for me as an individual, what is my approach to health? So my approach to health generally focused on trying to eat healthy, trying to be aware of what I'm putting inside my body, trying to do physical movements, whether it's exercises, walking or running or dancing or any other kind of movement that I really like. Using that as maintaining my body as a healthy, instrument to achieve what I want to do in my life.
And so this is something that you've learned, because I remember you telling me about how you reclaimed your health. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So during the stressful periods that I went through in medical school, I had this conflict in my head, which was like, I look at health this way, but my patients don't. So why? So I can really help my patients. Maybe the way I approach health, if my patients also approach it the same way, what if that happens? And what if they don't need medications all the time? They won't have to depend on medications all the time, because as much as medications are important for helping save a life and really helping normalize those physiological levels that are impacting the body, but in the longer term, a holistic approach or an integrative approach where there's also lifestyle engagement, like awareness for the lifestyle as well, that also becomes important. So I had this sense that having faced that much of stress through the medical school and then going through a period of my own realization that I don't think that I will be able to pursue MD or MS and treat people the way this system is working. I like the system in the way that it helps people in so many various ways, but I also sensed that individuals could be helped in a more holistic and in other ways as well. And then eventually, after my undergrad, when I did my internships as well, I realized that I want to be in the health domain. I want to help people heal, but I want to heal, or I want to be in the health space in a more integrative way, in a more preventative way, in a more lifestyle oriented way. And that's when I discovered yogic practices, and that's when I discovered Ayurvedic practices, and I started becoming aware of people who really do well with modern medicine, but then they had no other hopes, and they eventually had to surrender to Eastern traditions of medical healing, like Ayurveda or naturopathy. Or even body movements in traditional Chinese medicine, so Qigong and Tai Chi and all of that. And it actually helped them better.
Right.
Even objectively, it helped them better, their physiological systems.
Yeah, so one thing that I remember when we were talking is that you mentioned that when people start to embrace yoga, their sense of how to take care of themselves becomes natural and intuitive. You don't have to, like, for instance, count calories. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, in that as well, I felt like that happened personally to me as well. And I was on few medications for my skin. I was trying to make sure that my diet is proper. A lot of times I would maybe binge eat a little bit, but then do over exercising to get those calories to go. But then when I just thought that it wasn't really helping stabilize my weight, I had to put in extra efforts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, when I was introduced to yogic practices, when I was introduced to this beautiful foundational course in yoga that I did in India, it was for a month. And it used to be in the morning times. It was a very easy, simple course. You just had to go for 1.5 hours. You learned about basic body movement postures and pranayam and meditation, but you also learned about the philosophical aspect of yoga as well. So you learned a little bit about the history, about the diet, about different schools of yoga, so Ashtanga, Hatha, and about different philosophies in Indian psychology as well. And I felt that because I was in that state where I was like, let me just surrender to this process and see what happens.
Right.
Because the things that I've been doing earlier didn't really work out that well for me. Because I surrendered, so I made sure that I end up going regularly to the classes, and I started waking up early morning. I started doing the practices regularly. And because I feel that I was within the first week itself, I saw the differences in my body, not just the flexibility, but just feeling a sense of lightness in the body, feeling a sense of openness in the mind. Because I was like, I'm going to go all in and completely surrender to the process and then decide whether it works for me without going to other people and asking whether it works or not, because I'm going to experience it myself and then see it.
That's really beautiful. So what you're saying is that you're just trusting the process, and as a result, you feel a difference within, in terms of there's this sense of lightness in your being, right? So there's this sense of internal change in how you go about the world.
Yes. And I feel like because I might have trusted that entire process and I made efforts, or especially consistency is the word I would use here. I experienced a sense of in tune with my environment, in tune with the nature around me. And because I feel there was a heightened sense of consciousness in me because of being consistent with those practices, and also diving deep into the sattvic food or Ayurvedic eating, mindful eating practices, I realized that why is all of this not there in nutrition, in the modern nutrition or in modern medicine? Why is that not a part of it? And that made me question and made me very curious. As having a medical background, it made me very curious. And I was like, I would love to research on this. I would love to know more about the papers, the evidence-based researches that are happening. And then I literally dived deep into all of that on the internet, and I discovered some great research happening already, or that has happened, that has shown a powerful impact on cancer survivors, on chronic illnesses as well. I was really mind blown, and I think that was my introduction to the holistic aspect of health, whether it's yoga or even other systems of healing in the Eastern tradition.
So, Sakshi, I really appreciate you sharing this because I feel like you illustrated quite well. Like you're talking about how it feels inside to be able to embrace yoga. And you are doing wonderful work in bringing together Eastern and Western medicine. And I appreciate you being on this interview and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge here.
Thank you. Thank you, Leon. Anytime.